21st.
Brooklyn, stand up!
Kyrie's season is over.
The Nets say Kyrie Irving will undergo season-ending surgery to repair the right shoulder that's bothered since
November.
Brooklyn boy, I may take some getting used to.
Now, it is an arthroscopic surgery, but it's not as serious as other shoulder surgeries, but they take a long time to recover from.
You know it, I'm in the game.
This one felt like a throw-in year for me with Kyrie Irving because there wasn't any Kevin Durant.
Kyrie just has to remember it all starts with prioritize getting healthy.
Brooklyn.
The current unit is able to function more as a unit without Kyrie because Kyrie plays more superstar ball.
Happy Friday, everybody. You made it. Glad you're with us. Golic and Wingo, ESPN Radio, ESPN2, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our phone guests join us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Mike Golic Jr., Trey Wingo here with you. As is always the case, the devil is in the details, and we'll get into those details a little bit later with the proposed new collective bargaining agreement between the NFL and the NFLPA. The NFL owners have approved it. There's a vote today by the NFLPA reps to decide whether or not they want to take it forward. So we'll get to that a little bit later, and we got a lot to get into there. Al Michaels will join us a little bit later on this morning as it's the 40th anniversary of one of the greatest sporting upsets of all time, the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team taking down the Russians in the Lake Placid Olympics. But we begin, Junior, with the end, once again, of a season for Kyrie Irving. The Nets superstar coming over this offseason, only played in 20 games this season. Shoulder surgery on his right shoulder. He is done for the year.
A shoulder impingement here. So it's
impingement.
We had heard going into yesterday was going to see a specialist, mull his options in this. He had been getting cortisone shots, basically those like a steroid shot to try and calm down the surrounding muscle in the area. Wasn't working, and so he goes under the knife now, and the immediate reaction is kind of telling for where we've been for a lot of the season, right? We had this discussion the other day. Well, this is about next year for them anyway.
Very
this
much
is
so.
About, Kevin Durant wasn't going to be here this year. It was kind of whatever you could get out of it. The Nets were an 8 seed or whatever they were last year. So if you could build on that a little bit, great. But this was an investment in our future. And so most people look at this and say, all right, no harm, no foul. Just be ready to go at the tip-off of 2020 season.
Right. As they sit right now, the Nets are holding on to the 7th spot. So they are an improvement from last year. At this point, they've gone from 8 to 7.
Stock up.
Everything is working. But you're right. Much in the same way last season for LeBron in LA was really about whatever happens, and then we have this massive cap room we'll try and clear to get a max free agent, which they did in Anthony Davis, or the trade, however it all worked down. So this was sort of the red shirt year, for lack of a better term, for the Nets going forward, because the whole idea is for Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant to be those two superstars on the floor at the same time for the 2020-21 season, right? That's the whole thing going forward. So is that still in play? Here is our NBA insider, Brian Windhorst.
This is obviously something that Kyrie and the Nets were trying to avoid since November. He tried rehab. He tried getting a cortisone shot. He wasn't able to get the relief that he needed. And there was a window at one point that possibly Kevin Durant could maybe come back for the very end of the season. Durant has closed that door. He has come out and said he's not going to play no matter what. So it even further would lead Kyrie Irving to say, let's get this shoulder done. Now, it is an arthroscopic surgery, so it is not as serious as other shoulder surgeries, but they take a long time to recover from. This would probably impact his summer as well. But at the end of the day, even though this has been such a difficult season, Durant and Kyrie should technically be available for training camp next fall.
So I have two questions for you, and I think they're both legitimate. This is the second time in the last 3 seasons that Kyrie has had to be shut down because it was in 2018 with the Celtics toward the end of the year.
That Celtics playoff run that ended up really being the beginning of a lot of their problems when Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and the Young C's went out there and started to get their act together.
Correct. They made it to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Cavs and LeBron without Kyrie Irving. So this is the second time in the last 3 seasons that he's essentially had to have it shut down. So my first question is, can we just assume for next season that both A, Kyrie Irving will be healthy, and B, perhaps more importantly, Kevin Durant will be completely recovered from an Achilles, which, by the way, is not always the easiest thing to recover from.
Especially for guys around his height now.
Correct.
Weight-wise, he might have some help there. But, yeah, this is the interesting difference, I think, how we approach the NFL and the NBA mentally, right? Because the NBA is not a violent sport, as you've always said. It's a contact sport, not a collision sport.
Correct.
Because of that, we always assume health rather than question it. In the NFL, we wonder if you're ever going to be back. In the NBA, we assume that you are innocent until proven guilty when it comes to your health in the NBA. That year-to-year assumption is why you get fully guaranteed contracts, why you're willing to sign these guys for longer and bigger dollar amounts, because we just seem to assume that in a way that, especially with these two, when it's a shoulder, when it's a guy who shoots basketballs for a living,
correct,
you worry a little bit more about that. When it's an Achilles injury on a guy that's damn near 7 feet tall, I think you understandably worried about that. And that's before we even get to, all right, on the floor, does it mix? In the locker room, does it mix? Like, we already had Kyrie Irving giving the net State of the Union when he was healthy for like a day,
correct,
and basically taking a torch to that place in very quick order. Do we think all of a sudden him and Kevin Durant are going to stop being less dramatic when they get back together?
Right. So there's the health issue of the two of them. Can we just assume that both of them will be what we've seen them be before? And then there's the other question when it comes to Kyrie. Who is he as a player at this point? Look, I know what the numbers say. In 20 games this year, he scored 27 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. Oh, that's wonderful. But the Celtics were better off in that playoff run when he wasn't on the floor. And by the numbers this year, the Nets have been better when he hasn't been on the floor. I feel like peak Kyrie is when Kyrie was LeBron's number 2 in Cleveland when they went to all those finals those years. And Kyrie hated being that. And ever since then, it's been a very interesting dance about what Kyrie is as a player, what he can be, and can he be 1, or is he always going to be 1A?
Well, I think he came over to this union with Kevin Durant with the assumption that he's going to be 1B in this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know a world, and maybe that's the confidence when you're an elite level player that I never really got to necessarily touch.
Yeah.
But that idea that you think even in this instance where the rest of the world so clearly looks at this and says, yeah, Kevin Durant's the best player, and you signed up to play with him, you know you're playing second fiddle to this guy in a way that, remember, Kyrie Irving apologized to LeBron,
He
said,
did.
I had no idea
Absolutely.
what you were dealing with.
Correct.
Maybe had a bit of a change of heart about all this stuff, because on Kyrie's best day, he's still one of the best scorers in the NBA.
He is an amazing finisher. There's no question about that.
That's who he is, because the one thing we forget about that Celtics season is that team was very good going through the regular season, and then they lost him going into the postseason, and we went, oh, well, and that group surprised us. And then all the interpersonal things that happened after that are what they are. But they were a good basketball team with him on the court there as the guy leading the charge and all that. And he's not going to have to lead the charge here.
Yeah.
That's the other part of this, is we assume the best day, he gets to slot back into the role that we saw him have the most success in. Kevin Durant is the sun and the moon, and you get to be the stars.
Correct. And the interesting thing about that is, and you're right, maybe he has changed, but the last time we actually saw him in that role drove him crazy, right? He went that off season, he did all the fake LeBron stuff on social media and the Instagram stuff. I mean, he actively campaigned because he didn't want to be the stars to LeBron's sun and the moon. And you're right. Since that time, he has apologized.
Well, and you can say, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can say that.
Correct.
You're going to have to go and do it soon.
Exactly.
And
right?
That's the stuff. And the health concerns are real, but to me, it's always going to be with those guys. The concerns we had when they were going over there, which is, can this mesh of personalities hold up over time?
It's kind of like when a football team, like say the Ravens, the last couple of years, has had wild success in the regular season, and then they get to the playoffs the last 2 years and have lost 2 straight years, their first playoff game at home. There's nothing anybody can do until we see Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant together, and that mesh point is going to be acceptable for Kyrie. We can talk about it in this sort of, ethereal plane and what ifs and possibilities and scenarios and hypotheticals. But until they actually get together and prove they can work together on the court, nothing really matters.
No, and that's the other thing that transfers in the NBA is reputation.
Yes.
Like, that's a hard thing to get over when you become Flat Earth Kyrie Irving, when you become burner account Twitter Kevin Durant.
Exactly.
These things take a while for everyone to forget the stain of and remember that you're just a really good basketball player who ended up taking the Golden State Warriors, who we thought were the preeminent dynasty, and making them markedly better if you are Kevin Durant. And if you're Kyrie Irving, you have one of the biggest shots in the NBA Finals that we've seen in the last decade.
Yep.
I mean, what you did to help lift the Cleveland Cavaliers to that title is extremely noteworthy, even with LeBron being the alpha in that situation.
So we'll see what happens with the Nets going forward. Again, right now they're the 7th seed in the East, but for the Nets, it's all about next year if both these guys are healthy and can they mesh in a way where it's okay for Kyrie not to be the alpha male. You mentioned reputations. Speaking of reputations, another player in another sport continues to have shots taken at his reputation, but are they even remotely deserved at this point? We'll get to that after this.
After this word from Shell, they say the